It might have been warrior or young. I'm gonna assume that it was young. Open warrior. Pretty sure he was just gonna have a helmet. Why is this so dark? So he was the king of Ithaca, son of Laertes and Antislia. I don't even know how to say these people. They're cool. They cool people. He was great. He was a great bowman, archer. I don't know what they call it. I should get like a tissue or something. I don't know why. Like, okay, hold on. I'll be back. When I am, stuff will happen. So we are now using Blender Cycles. Bam! That makes it look so much better. Not really. Why is this? Okay. Alright. Hang on, guys. What we are going to do is... Damn. Where is that toga? Do I even have... Oh. Why do I have so many togas? What? Apparently it was just called toga. Well, that wasn't it. Or is it? I don't know. Whatever. We don't need no togas anyway. What we need is the node editor. Been working with this for quite a while now. That's like, I don't know, 2 days. Anyway, let's get on Minnesota Public Radio. Wait,
Waiter at the Loward Hotel in St. Paul.
Ooh.
Robin Hickman
There we
lives
go.
in St. Paul. Parks was her great uncle, and she's among those hoping to rename Landmark Plaza in his honor.
This memorial place, this healing place, will be surrounded by Uncle Gordon's footsteps. And again, in fact, it's right across the street, St. Paul Hotel, across Rice Park, the Minnesota Club, both where he worked as a waiter. Again, his music was played at a hotel down the street.
Parks died in New York City in 2006. He already has an alternative high school named in his honor in St. Paul. Tim Nelson, Minnesota Public Radio News.
This is Minnesota Public Radio News. The time, 9:06.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Muhammad Ali is dead. The man considered the greatest boxer of all time died surrounded by his family at a hospital in Phoenix
That was
from
actually
respiratory
this year?
problems after decades of Parkinson's. He was 74. Ali enthralled, outraged, and inspired millions in the boxing ring or in front of a microphone.
Joe's gonna come out smoking, and I ain't gonna be joking. I'll be pecking and a poking, pouring water on this smoking. Then this might shock and amaze you, but I will destroy Joe Frazier.
NPR's Tom Golden has this remembrance of Muhammad Ali.
There we go.
October 1960, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali's given name, had won a gold medal at the Rome Olympics that year. Now he wanted more, a professional heavyweight championship. He arrived in Miami to work with legendary trainer Angelo Dundee, who died in 2012. Dundee remembered the first day Clay showed up.
Bounding up the steps of the Fifth Street Gym, and the steps were pretty rickety, you know. All wood, bouncing up.
Maybe Tiger won.
Right up all your bums are going to beat them all.
18-year-old Cassius Clay, bounding, fearless, leading with his mouth.
I'm not only a fighter, I'm a poet, I'm a prophet, I'm the resurrector, I'm the savior of the boxing world. If it wasn't for me, the game would be dead.
That ego.
Young Clay made boxing an art form.
Oh, nice.
He was an original, a heavyweight who didn't move around the ring, he danced. He'd thrill the crowd with his quick scissor step shuffle. On defense, he'd slip and slide, says Dundee, and then flick that jab.
He had a jab that was like a snake. He said snake lick him, and he hit it with the jab, you know. Snake lick him, take him home, lock him up, you know, had her own expression.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Rumble, young man, rumble. Boxing reporters never had so much fun.
Let me see you close your mouth and just keep it closed. Well, you know that's impossible. No, keep it closed. You know that's impossible. I'm the greatest. And I'm knocking out all bones. And if you get too small, I'll knock you out.
If you get too small?
As the mouth roared, the victories started piling up, and all of it prelude to a 1964 battle against the Big Bad Bear, heavyweight champion Sonny Liston. Liston was a fearsome opponent. Nobody gave the young kid a shot.
Liston seems bewildered. He's unable to cope with Clay's sharpshooting.
But after 6 rounds, Liston was done. He didn't come out for the 7th, and Clay was the new champion.
I'm the king of the world. Hold it. Hold it. You're not that pretty. I'm a bad man. I shook up the world.
But 22-year-old Cassius Clay was just getting started.
Why do you insist on being called Muhammad Ali now? Well, that's the name given to me by my leading teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's my original name. That's a black man name. Cassius Clay was my slave name. I'm no longer a slave.
After the Liston fight, Muhammad Ali revealed he was a member of the black separatist movement called Nation of Islam. Its leader, Elijah Muhammad, preached that integration and intermarriage were wrong and white people were devils, an idea Ali defended in a 1971 TV interview.
And I'm going to look at 2 or 3 white people who are trying to do right and don't see the other million trying to kill me. I'm not that big of a fool. And I'm not
the Warriors definitely gonna have a hat on, which.
If the white people of the country are not the devil, then they should prove they're not the devil.
Ali became a polarizing figure in America. Many sports writers vilified him. Black boxer Floyd Patterson said, "I don't believe God put us here to hate one another. Cassius Clay is disgracing himself and the Negro race." To others, Ali became a loud and unapologetic symbol of black pride.
There was a great deal of excitement in seeing that because there was a boldness that many of us did not know.
Reverend Quasi Thornell from Washington, D.C. was an African-American teenager when Ali burst onto the scene.
We were more encouraged by our
leather helmet.
Just go along with the system and not be bold and bodacious as Muhammad Ali was.
Ali's boldest move and most controversial came in 1967.
My intention is to box to win a clean fight, but in war, the intention is to kill, and continue killing innocent people.
At the height of the Vietnam War, Ali refused induction into the U.S. military, saying, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." Some called him a traitor. For those in a growing anti-war movement, Ali was a hero who paid a significant price. He was convicted of draft evasion, and although he avoided jail time, he was stripped of his heavyweight title and banned from boxing at the age of 25, just as he was entering his prime. It would be more than 3 years before Ali returned to the ring.
Referee Arthur McCanny has them touch gloves, something they've been doing all night.
Following his exile, Ali squared off against the late Joe Frazier, who became heavyweight champion in Ali's absence. The March 1971 showdown was billed as the fight of the century. Frazier won, handing Ali his first professional loss. It was also the first of 3 epic bouts between them. Frazier, with his boxer's mashed face and snorting bull style in the ring, could never equal Ali's finesse and skill as a fighter, nor could he match Ali's wit, which often turned cruel when the subject was Joe Frazier.
You'll also see why I say he's a gorilla. You'll see how ugly he is.
Okay.
It was theater to Ali, but in a 2007 interview, Ali biographer Thomas Hauser said the words and frequent taunts were like broken glass in Frazier's stomach. It's one of the reasons, said Hauser, that even late in life, Frazier harbored ill will toward Ali.
Even though
what did
Muhammad
Odysseus
said to
wear?
me that if God ever called him to a holy war, he wanted Joe Frazier fighting beside him.
Undoubtedly, Howard Cosell would have done the Holy Wars play-by-play, as he did for many of Ali's fights. The 2 men had a symbiotic relationship. Their interview sessions were more like hilarious jousting matches, with Ali needling the pedantic former lawyer, always threatening to tear off Cosell's obvious toupee. These
so
are excerpts
weird looking.
from a TV tribute to the 2 men.
I'm gonna let everybody know that thing you got on your head is a phony and it comes from a tail of a pony.
The body is now a shell of what it used to be. The man's beset by fear. What are you going to do to George for me?
He just said the man's body is not what it used to be. The man is beset by fear. Something about me. You crazy.
All right, we're gonna work on the Warrior, but
when it came to boxing IQ, none was higher than Ali's. In 1974, against the menacing George Foreman, Ali used a tactic called the rope-a-dope. He stayed on the ropes, covering up, letting Foreman punch himself out. Then Ali struck quickly, knocked out Foreman, and became champion a second time. A year later, the Thrilla in Manila was the final fight in the Ali-Frazier trilogy. It was an awesome and horrible slugfest that ended with Ali winning, but admitting afterwards, it was the closest to death that I could feel.
This is too painful. It's too much work. I might have a heart attack or something. I want to get up while I'm on top.
It would have been the perfect time to stop, but Ali kept fighting another 6 years. In the early 1980s, he was diagnosed with pugilistic Parkinson's syndrome. His last big public moment came in 1996 when Ali lit the flame at the Atlanta Summer Olympics, shaking, his face frozen by a Parkinson's mask. This was a new generation's image of the man called the greatest of all time, but the sadness was mixed with global love. Muhammad Ali was the rare, perhaps only person who could go anywhere, Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, a marketplace in Latin America, and people would stop and point and smile. In his life, he traveled from a boxer's cruelty to kindness. A man who stood up and shouted out for his principles ultimately embraced the quiet principle of spirituality. But in later years, his words muted by Parkinson's, Ali was asked if he'd do it all over exactly the same, even if he knew in advance how he'd end up. The answer? You bet I would. Tom Goldman, NPR News.
The shooting death of Harambe, the 17-year-old western lowland gorilla, after a 4-year-old boy fell into his cage at the Cincinnati Zoo, is a tragedy in all ways. Harambe delighted zoogoers and may have done the boy no harm. The little boy's parents say they're grateful their son survived and is doing well. But many people on social media platforms have attacked the mother as neglectful. Wayne Picelli, president of the Humane Society, said on his blog that the debate over how Harambe died reminds him of old dorm room discussions where people would pose imaginary questions that weighed the life of an animal against a human being's. But if some of the people who snarl at the boy's parents on social media want to do something more for animals, they may need to look no further than their own dinner. We've heard a lot in recent years about the 8.5 billion chickens that are slaughtered for food in the United States every year. The ones that live on factory farms are kept in cages.
Oh shit, chickens are an endangered species now.
Their feet never touch the ground, they never see the sun or sky, they never play or mate. Their beaks are often snipped or burned off to keep them from pecking each other to death in those cramped, congested cages. Harambe's death might also remind us how more than 100 million pigs are raised for food in the United States. The ASPCA points out that pigs, who are known to be as intelligent as dogs, one of the few animals that Americans both keep as pets and raise for food. Most pigs are kept in windowless sheds on factory farms in cages so small they cannot turn around, so they will grow fat. They live in their own manure, and the air is so heavy with ammonia that many pigs develop lesions on their lungs. What about this one? We could go on, but it is not necessary to become a vegetarian to change what we eat to consume fewer animals, which is probably healthier anyway. What happened to Harambe was a catastrophe, but one so rare as to be almost unprecedented. The treatment of so many millions of animals raised for food can be just business as usual.
I don't understand how you're going to compare a endangered species to a chicken.
A full-service live event production company offering audio, video, lighting, staging, and scenery support for corporate events, meetings, concerts, or theatrical events of any size nationwide. More information at livewirenow.com.
But whatever.
Programming supported by the Minnesota Academy of Otolaryngology. Otolaryngologists are ear, nose, and throat surgeons specializing in head and neck cancer, facial plastic surgery, and sleep, sinus, voice, and hearing disorders. ENTMN.org.
You're listening to Weekend Edition on Minnesota Public Radio News.
Odysseus still doesn't have feet.
Baker Daniels, lawyers collaborating with clients and one another in business transactions and commercial litigation around the globe. On the web at fagrebd.com.
On our Monday, all things considered, an individual committed with a developmental disability shouldn't be in a criminal setting where there are sexual predators. How people without mental illness are ending up in a state-run psychiatric hospital. That and all the day's news. Join me starting at 3.
I'm Windsor Johnston with these headlines. Boxing legend Muhammad Ali has died at the age of 74. He'd been treated for a respiratory condition at a Phoenix area hospital this week. Ali's funeral will be held in his hometown, Louisville, Kentucky. Investigators are heading to Fort Hood, Texas, after 9 soldiers were killed during a training exercise this week. An Army vehicle they were traveling in overturned while attempting to cross a creek swollen by recent rain. Several cars of a Union Pacific train are continuing to burn in northern Oregon after derailing yesterday. The tanker cars were hauling crude oil. Dozens of nearby homes near the town of Mosher have been evacuated, and several road closures are in place. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington.
Delete that. Whoa, that's... Jesus, I just want the freaking body, man.
EBSCO, studying how people use information and developing technologies and resources to create greater access to content. EBSCO employs developers, subject experts, and librarians.
Grab.
At careers.ebsco.com.
This is getting annoying.
Optum, a health services and innovation company. Optum works to power modern healthcare by connecting every part of it, from doctors and hospitals to pharmacies, health plans, and employers.
Oh God.
Learn more at optum.com.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Some Republicans have been talking for months about a potential independent candidate for president.
Let's try appending. What did I do?
Others suggested Condoleezza Rice,
I think I linked
retired
it.
Army General Stanley McChrystal, or Mark Cuban, the billionaire sports mogul.
Seriously?
Nothing developed. Now there is a name and possibly a candidate, David French. Ed Morrissey, host of the Ed Morrissey Show on Hot Air and author of the book Going
take that
Red,
back.
joins us now via Skype from Minnesota. Thanks very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you.
David French has never run for office. He's a writer for National Review. He served with the U.S. Army in Iraq. Harvard lawman, taught at Cornell, and I think he'd be the first bearded president since William Howard Taft. What else should we know about him?
First off, he's a very good man. I've had a chance to talk with David French on a couple of occasions. Both he and his wife are active in the conservative movement and have done very good work in the conservative movement. But the point of running for president is probably a little beyond what David French has done in his life, and especially coming this late in the cycle. I mean, it really is spitballing type of exercise to toss David French's name out there. It's not somebody who has a large personal following. It's not somebody who's even known outside of intellectual conservative circles very much. And I think that this is basically a desperation move because nobody else is signing up for this project.
May I ask, are you supporting anyone?
I'm actually still struggling with that question, Scott. As a Republican, I'm almost always enthusiastic about the Republican nominee, and that's not the case this time around. I'm not a never Trump person, but I'm finding myself here, maybe for the first time since I started voting, wondering if I can actually cast a ballot for the Republican nominee. And so I'm kind of taking a wait and see. Let's see how these things develop, and obviously that's the direction in which I'd be leaning, but I just don't feel like I can say that I'm definitely going to pull the lever for Donald Trump in this cycle.
I mean, we don't have time for me to ask you about every question that's been raised, even in this week alone, about Mr. Trump and his candidacy. But let me ask you about one point, suggesting that a judge would rule because of his ethnicity.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I mean morally horrible. And electorally, I think it's a disaster. I think the idea that a judge's ethnicity is the reason why he's ruling in a case about his Trump University fraud claims is laughably ridiculous on its face, and I think it demeans Trump more than anything else, and I think it's a difficult thing to deal with when you're trying to figure out whether or not you want to cast a vote for somebody.
Forgive me for putting this so colloquially, but if you're prepared to maybe hold your nose and vote for someone you consider morally reprehensible, the Republican nominee, why aren't you prepared to hold your nose and vote for a Democratic nominee?
Because I think she's morally reprehensible as well. And
Jeez.
so when you look at it, you say, what is it that's going to advance the policies and the values best that I care about? If you have a Republican in the White House, even if it's somebody that you don't like very much and you think has a lot of personal issues, at least you have the opportunity to advance things either with that person's help or at least without his absolute opposition to those things. Whereas I think if we have 4 years of Hillary Clinton, we're going to lose so much ground that it may be difficult to make back up.
Ed Morrissey, he's host of the Ed Morrissey Show on Hot Air and author of the book Going Red. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
California primaries next Tuesday, and among the possibilities is that Bernie Sanders could win California and Hillary Clinton could clinch the nomination all on the same night. Democrats are divided. Governor Jerry Brown, who was sort of Bill Clinton's Bernie Sanders in 1992, endorsed Hillary Clinton this week, saying, "This is no time for Democrats to keep fighting each other." Roseanne DeMoro is the executive director of National Nurses United. She's been campaigning for Bernie Sanders and joins us from the studios of Youth Radio in Oakland. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Is party unity important to you?
At what cost?
I'm just asking the question in an open way. Any cost you want to describe?
If it's party unity to essentially validate an agenda that's harmed America so badly over the last several decades, then party unity is irrelevant. What's relevant is what the party stands for, what the soul of the party is. And so this isn't like a basketball game. The Democrats are better than the Republicans. This is far deeper, and it's a far greater moment in history, frankly. I mean, it's a social movement in the Sanders campaign to heal America, not to continue the suffering.
What issues inspire you to support Bernie Sanders?
Well, first of all, with the nurses, every hour, every day, are stories about the suffering of patients. And every social problem presents in the hospital. And even with the new mandate of the ACA, which has some positives, obviously, what we're finding is that the quality is decreasing, the premiums are increasing, patients are cutting their pills in half, the out-of-pocket costs are enormous. I mean, our health shouldn't be a commodity, and that's what's happened. And so fighting for a single-payer system has become a bedrock issue in this campaign. It's always been a bedrock issue for the nurses nationally. And when we joined with the campaign, Bernie Sanders amplified all of the issues of the nurses.
Hillary Clinton, who served the Obama administration and quotes the president a lot on the stump, says that it's just not practical to expect in the political landscape today to expect the U.S. Congress to approve a single-payer health care system, and she wants to expand the Affordable Care Act. That's
Hillary
not good
Clinton,
enough for you?
Well, first of all,
yeah,
I believe she lacks political will to get the job done, which is one of the reasons that the nurses are supporting Bernie Sanders. If our health isn't achievable, then what's she doing running for president? You don't give up on health. You can give up on a lot of things, and there's compromises to be made. But when it comes to the health of my children, of our families, of our communities, you don't give up on people.
You know, of course, that the math is against Senator Sanders becoming the Democratic candidate.
I look at things far beyond math. I look at the mass momentum, just like in sports. I mean, Bernie, we look at sports.
Hillary Clinton has won, at the moment, I believe, something like 3 million votes more than Senator Sanders.
The momentum Bernie has and the role of the superdelegates in the convention can be enormous, because the threshold question is going to be, with the mass momentum behind him and the motivated voters, who is going to beat Donald Trump? Bernie brings with him the critical vote, the independent vote. He has inspired a new generation, a generation that will ultimately control this country, and thank God for them, because they are the ones who are going to carry this vote for the Democratic Party. And if it's not Bernie Sanders, I do believe there'll be massive disaffection.
Massive disaffection that translates to not voting for the Democratic candidate?
Voting, yes.
Would not voting, as you suggest you might not do, would that amount to giving Mr. Trump just a greater possibility of winning if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton?
I don't know how I'm going to vote if that happens, and I don't know what the Nurses Association is going to do, because that's a discussion that's later on down the line if Hillary Clinton were to prevail. Ultimately, what you're asking is, are we going to choose between what we would consider, or most people would consider, the lesser of two evils? And I just, I think it's early. And honestly, this isn't business as usual. This isn't what we need in America, to just say, oh, sorry, your team lost, go home. It's not how it's going to be.
I don't think Hillary Clinton's supporters are saying your team lost, go home. On the contrary, I think they're saying your team is about to lose, join our team.
I'd not ask them to tell me what Hillary Clinton represents.
Roseanne DeMoro is Executive Director of National Nurses United. Thanks so much for being with us.
That's so bad.
Thank you.
And we're talking more today about the death of Muhammad Ali. He died last night in Phoenix at the age of 74. The everlasting heavyweight champion of the world said he'd like to be remembered as a man who, quote, became a leader and a champion of his people. And he added, I wouldn't even mind if folks forgot how pretty I was. We're going to turn now to Stephen Carter, writer and professor at the Yale Law School. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Scott.
What did Muhammad Ali mean to so many people, including you, my friend, the fancy Yale law prof?
I really, in a sense,
it's going to be
like
interesting.
A lot of young people, especially young black people of my generation, grew up with Muhammad Ali. Here was a man who was a champion, the best at his sport, but was also defiant of authority, determined to follow his God in his way, and who stood up for causes, the war, the civil rights movement, and others, at a time when, although it's easy to forget, a lot of people still were very reluctant to hold those causes dear.
Yeah. And how do we add that together with the fact that, the source of his fame was this sport where men beat each other? I mean, I did a series years ago on brain damage in boxing, and I've grown to hate boxing, but I always loved Muhammad Ali.
I think we all did, and we all felt that way, that here was a man who transformed the public image of the sport, in a sense. Before Ali, boxing was something that people watched in smoky bars, and it was seen as not quite a thing for the educated and the elite to care about. And here was a man who, through his brilliance, through his ability to articulate great ideas, and frankly, through his audacity in the predictions he made and in the things he said,
drew around him a coterie of intellectuals and other followers.
Oh, it is definitely the next several weeks.
That people like George Plimpton and Norman Mailer would write about.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm reading an article from
writing a
2010.
great biography about him. There was a time when the editor of New Yorker wouldn't touch a boxing figure.
But I'm not seeing this.
I think that Dave Kindred, who was the sports editor of the New York Times for so many years, or sports writer of the New York Times for so many years, wrote that before Ali, sports was mostly slow dancing, and Ali turned it into rock and roll. He brought boxing into the mainstream, and he also became very quickly one of the most recognizable faces on the earth because of, again, the courageous stance that he took and the controversy that surrounded him.
And what do we make of that, the world figure that he became? I mean, part of it might be the communications technology could make someone a world figure, but he, boy, he was something amazing that way, too.
Well, you have to think back to 1967 when here he was champion, the world champion, and he was refusing induction for the selective service.
I'm just gonna look up some more clothes that Odysseus would have worn. Cause I'm. This is
millions of dollars on the table. He said he didn't care what they did to him as long as he never had to go kill anybody. This was a powerful moment, and it resonated around the world because remember that the Vietnam
This is apparently the helmet he would have worn that his father owned, but it was stolen from, and then it was given back to Odysseus. I don't know if I
and that I think helped to
really
build
want to
the
use
legend
that.
became the story of Muhammad Ali.
And what do we make of us as a country? Because when he won the championship, it must be said, unexpectedly in 1964, there was still segregation in many quarters of the United States. He was very controversial and not beloved, and today we're remembering him as, as just a great citizen of the world.
One of the great things about Ali's story is exactly that he could rise from the background that he did at the time.
I mean, it's really
from this figure who generates
whatever creative rights I want to use, but
worldwide ambassador for peace, this enormous hero. And you asked a few minutes ago about what about the sport of boxing, and I think it's fair to say that the sport of boxing is dying as it should. It's a terribly brutal thing. And Ali, in a sense, although he brought it to prominence, also has helped bring it down because most of us can remember seeing Ali at the 1996 Olympics when he was the athlete who lit the flame, and there he was basically decrepit. He was trembling, he was shuffling. This wasn't the man we remembered used to float like a butterfly
it's
and
still
like a bee. Seeing Ali
kind of the same as
climb,
this.
I think has helped as much as anything else
Ew,
to put one of the nails in the coffin of that brutal sport.
Stephen Carter, remembering Muhammad Ali. And you're listening to Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Chibi.
Big data may be a key to saving California's state amphibian. The red-legged frog landed on the endangered species list in the threatened category after it was overhunted for its legs.
Why is it called Chibi?
Lost much of its habitat to develop.
What?
Sam Harnett headed out into
weird.
a swamp to see how a scientist and a tech company are working together to try to keep the frog population afloat.
The sun has just set over a swamp east of Santa Cruz, California. Gary Kittleson is putting on a headlamp and waders.
Cabela's waders.
Kittleson is an environmental consultant, and he's searching for red-legged frogs. Some years he says he'd be ecstatic to find just one or two. This marshland is called the Watsonville Slough, and it's vital habitat for red-legged frogs. A local land trust hired Kittleson to count them so it could determine whether the population is growing or shrinking. It's no easy task.
Watch your step.
Kittleson has to spot frogs in thick brush and pick out their low calls from all the high-pitched chorus frogs. Mere mortals like us wouldn't be able to do it, but Kittleson can hear red-legged frogs even while he's talking.
They've become the most consistent red-legged frog. I just heard a red-legged frog.
Kittleson cocks his head to listen.
Because I was talking, he probably is going to stop.
I can't believe you heard that.
Well,
like mid-sentence.
Yeah, so, but it was that chuck, chuck, chuck.
Right.
So it was three pulses.
Kittleson is so good at this, his nephews called him the Frog Whisperer. This is the old way of counting animals. It requires a lot of time and manpower. And you only get a tiny slice of data, because a guy like Kittleson can only stand out in the swamp for so long. This is why the Land Trust is partnering with Conservation Metrics. With Kittleson's help, the company has put up song meters. They're these little green boxes with microphones that record all night and capture everything.
There's the song meter, mounted on fence posts. It's recording us now.
Conservation Metrics employees load the recordings into a computer. Then they write algorithms that comb through the hours of audio to find the red-legged frog calls. CEO Matthew McCown says what would normally take a whole team of field biologists can now be done by one person and a computer.
Our whole point is to make conservation better, so we are trying to make it as cheap as possible.
McCown founded Conservation Metrics 3 years ago. He says big data is the hot tool in conservation to study endangered animals and threatened habitats.
What you're going to start having is cameras, acoustic sensors, satellites trained on these important parts of the world.
Back at the Watsonville Slough, night is falling. Kittleson is waist deep in swamp water. He's shining his headlamp around the pond, looking for the glare of frog eyes. And then he spots one.
Beautiful adult red-legged frog.
It's sitting on a log floating by the water's edge. Kittleson isn't optimistic about the future of this little guy's species, but he says the only way to know if conservation efforts are helping is good data. For NPR News, I'm Sam Harnett in Watsonville, California.
This is NPR News.
Programming on Minnesota Public Radio is supported in part by Target, committed to giving 5% of its income to communities, more than $4 million every week. More information at target.com/community.
Programming is supported by the Minnesota Nurses Association, professional nurses with the skills and experience dedicated to ensuring the safety and quality of patient care. Nurses put the care in healthcare.
You're listening to Weekend Edition on Minnesota Public Radio News. Coming up at 10, it's Marketplace Weekend, the best of car talk at 11. And Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me comes your way at noon. If you were listening in the 7 o'clock hour, you heard me speaking with meteorologist Ron Trenda. We are right kind of at the edge of a system that's swirling across the country, and it's bringing a mix of clouds and some fog and drizzle and rain up in northeastern Minnesota right now. Here in the Twin Cities, mostly just a mix of clouds and sun. It looks like we'll see scattered showers and isolated thunderstorms across the state through today.
I'm Mr. Johnston with these headlines. Ongoing flooding in Fort Bend County, Texas has prompted local officials to extend an emergency declaration there by 2 weeks. There have been reports of at least 16 flood-related deaths. Investigators are heading to Fort Hood, Texas after 9 soldiers were killed during a training exercise this week. A transport vehicle the soldiers were traveling in overturned while attempting to cross a creek swollen by recent rain. Crews are working to cool tankers from a Union Pacific train that derailed in northern Oregon yesterday along the Columbia River. Several cars hauling crude oil left the tracks and caught fire near the town of Mosher, about 70 miles east of Portland. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington.
Support for news comes from Inada, Japanese maker of full-body massage chairs, including the Flex 3S with pre-programmed shiatsu massages and full-body stretch sessions at inadausa.com. That's INADAUSA.com. And the Wallace Foundation, a source of ideas for improving education and enrichment for children, both in and out of school. More information is available at wallacefoundation.org.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Homegoing Yaa Jesse's highly anticipated first novel traces the story of two branches of a family tree that grow over 3 centuries. Afia and Essie are two half-sisters born in different villages in the Ghana of the 1700s. Afia is married off to an Englishman. Now she learns that the British soldiers in Ghana call their local women wenches instead of wives, like the women and families who wait for them back home, and she goes to live in regal comfort of the Cape Coast Castle. Her sister Essie winds up right below her, imprisoned in the cruel squalor of the castle's dungeon, and she's sold into slavery in America. Homegoing follows each family line through Ghana to America and the Civil War, through the coal mines of Alabama and jazz clubs of Harlem and dope dens to the present day. It is the debut novel from Yaa Jesse, who joins us from the studios of the University of California, Berkeley. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
How do you bring to life a world 3 centuries ago?
I did a lot of research for this novel. I like to say that my research was wide but shallow. I read a little bit of a lot of books, and a book that really helped me was The Door of No Return by William St. Clair. He took a bunch of archival research about the Cape Coast Castle, so it's a book that really just talks about what life might have been like in the castle in and around the 18th century, and it really helped me wrap my head around what it might have been like for my characters. And then the rest, I think, is just a wild and vivid imagination.
Yeah. And it must be said, you don't spare African slave traders from villainy, do you?
I don't. I think, I grew up here in Alabama, and the conversation around slavery is much different here than it is in Ghana. So I think I was a little bit more aware of it, or aware, I suppose, of the result of it than the people living on the coast of West Africa who didn't get to see, what the results of the slave trade was. And yet they have this huge monument in Ghana to slavery, this Cape Coast Castle that still stands, that you can still take tours in. I wanted to talk about the Ghanaian role in it, the complicity on our side of things.
This is your debut novel.
Yeah.
The literary world is watching it. How did you get here? I mean, you grew up in Huntsville, went to school at Stanford.
Yeah, I'm 26 actually. I turned 26 last June. I grew up just reading incredibly voraciously. My dad's a professor. He teaches French language and Francophone African literature, and just never turned down a trip to the library. So I kind of always knew, I suppose, that I wanted to work in books somehow, and pretty early on for me, reading and writing went hand in hand.
I've had the pleasure of being in Huntsville once for 3 days.
Oh, cool.
I found it a very cosmopolitan, sophisticated community. But I probably don't have to tell you, Alabama has quite a history where slavery is concerned.
Yeah, I think Huntsville's actually a great city to grow up in as far as Alabama goes. NASA is there, and it's got a university, and the old fun fact about it used to be that it had the most PhDs per capita of any American city. I don't know if that still holds true, but there's a lot happening there. And then, you drive 20 minutes out in any direction, and Alabama is Alabama. And so I think I was kind of constantly interacting, I guess, with really what the legacy of slavery is. And, coming from a country, Ghana, that had a role in slavery, and then ending up in a place where slavery is still so strongly felt, institutionalized racism is still so strongly felt, the irony of that wasn't lost on me. And I think had I not grown up in Alabama, I don't know that I would have ever written this book.
And it struck me as I was reading this book that you're writing a family history that a lot of African American families would find very difficult to put together, because slavery obliterated so many of those family lives.
Absolutely. I think one of the huge tragedies of slavery is just the fact that family lines got completely cut off. There are so many characters in this book that, were I to follow them, the story would have been completely different, and the fact that they never get to know their siblings, their parents, they're just completely cut off from certain sides of their family, I think is deeply, deeply sad. And beyond that, just the fact that most African Americans don't know exactly where on the continent that they came from, so they can't tie themselves back to an ethnic group, a country.
When you were turning yourself into a writer,
yes,
were there any writers you particularly favored, even imitated a little, learned from?
In middle school, I was really, really into Victorian literature. I loved Dickens. Also, George Eliot was huge for me. Middlemarch was one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
And then age 17 was when I read Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, and that really just felt like a light switch going off. It was the first time I'd ever been assigned a book by a black woman in my entire educational career, and then it really struck me the fact that I could tell stories about people who looked like me. That was really a turning point in my life, and so she's been a huge influence. And then later in college, I started to read Achebe and James Baldwin and Edward P. Jones and Jhumpa Lahiri. So many authors who have had a lasting impression on me.
Have your parents read Homegoing?
My father has read all of the chapters that take place in Ghana. I needed help researching and fact-checking, that sort of thing. My mother is reading it right now, and I think my dad's going to read the whole thing after her. So I think they're excited to see it all come together.
They don't need my advice, but I think the trick is tell them they should read it in a public place.
Oh, really?
And with a conspicuous smile on their faces.
I will let them know.
Yeah, Jessie, her novel, Homegoing. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Small change about the internet this week, a decapitalization. The Associated Press, and with it the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and other publications declared that as of June 1st, they will no longer spell internet with a capital I. Tom Kent is standards editor of the Associated Press and co-editor of the AP Style book. He joins us from New York. Tom, thanks so much for being with us.
How are you, Scott?
Fine, thanks. But I don't have to answer a lot of these questions from persnickety grammar people. Why was the internet capitalized in the first place?
Well, it's a good question. The internet is wholly generic, like the telephone or electricity. It never was trademarked. It's not based on any proper noun. And I think the best reason for capitalizing it in the past may just have been the term was new. I've read that at one point people capitalized phonograph, so maybe it's something like that. But now it's a routine part of daily life.
Is it in any way because to a lot of people the internet is a place?
It is. And when people sometimes say, I bought it on the internet, maybe they're thinking it's like, I bought it in France. But it's not a place. It's a network of places. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere.
I should explain that NPR apparently has
I'll
not
be
changed
right
its
back.
policy, so you will notice that I am pronouncing internet with a capital I.
It comes right through.
Thank you. Can I ask you a couple of other AP-style questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, as a Chicagoan, I've always had to refer to the L train as an EL. You say just the letter L will be okay from now on.
Yeah, we now have L as the shortest entry in the AP style book. What they say is L in the news media in Chicago. That's what the Chicago Transit Authority says. So EL, I think there's probably some sentimental attachment in the sense of elevated, but it really is the L, so we have formalized that now.
How often do you review and revise?
We review the style book officially once a year, but most people these days access a style book not through the paper book, but through style book online, and we make updates to that all the time. So it's a fairly frequent thing. A lot of the changes are small, but now and then we do things that in the world of style are a big deal. A year or so ago, the world was turned upside down, or part of the world was turned upside down, when we decided that it was okay to say over 10 instead of more than 10. And the internet change has brought a lot of reaction too. Somebody tweeted after we announced the change, AP has lowercased internet. Somewhere tonight, galaxies are burning.
And you know what? The AP and NPR will be there to cover them.
Absolutely.
Tom Kent, standards editor of the Associated Press, thanks so much.
Pleasure.
And because no one can get enough of the internet, lower or uppercase, tomorrow on Weekend Edition Sunday, Rachel Martin will speak with Virginia Heffernan about her new book, Magic and Loss, which reveals the internet as one of mankind's great masterpieces, a giant work of art. Olga Bell is a classically trained pianist who's ventured deeply into the world of electronica and now into dance music. Moscow. She grew up in Anchorage and now lives in Brooklyn. So, of course, she joins us from London to talk about her new album, Tempo. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Hi.
How did you begin work on Tempo?
I guess I felt a compulsion to dance, to do something physical. My previous record was sort of intellectually motivated, and this one was just much more about dancing.
You graduated from the New England Conservatory?
I did.
And you've been playing music, I gather, from a pretty young age.
I have been. I started piano when I was 7, and yeah, I was a very serious classical pianist until I was about 21.
And then what happened?
Well,
I mean, you're still a serious pianist, but then what happened?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I didn't get into Juilliard's graduate program. Isn't that such a first world problem to have? And then and then everything changed after that. So yeah, and I moved to New York, got a laptop, started with GarageBand, and gradually kind of made my way into songwriting, production.
So who knows, but if you'd gotten into Juilliard, you might be on a very different track?
I might be. Absolutely.
Well, you'll make them regret that decision, won't you?
I'll show them. I said if I rather can you tell me I do it, keep from getting in my own way, and don't sugarcoat it, I'll be brutal. Running around with a fire, well, too many minutes tick, tick, tick by. Oh, I said if I rather can you tell me I do it, keep from getting in my own way.
What do you love about this music that maybe didn't connect with you in classical music?
Well, I sort of led a double life when I was strictly a classical musician. I would do what I considered my job, which I loved, and which was sort of to honor the wishes of my Russian mother and my Russian piano teacher, and I practiced and I did my competitions and recitals and really loved it and really flourished. But then when nobody was looking or paying attention, I would sort of listen in my spare time to Radiohead and Björk and lots of hip-hop, lots and lots of Tribe Called Quest and Wu-Tang, and I would play those beats and just sort of frolic in the sound world. And because of the way that I was trained, piano, very serious piano study, I guess as a Russian or maybe as anybody, it's like gymnastics or ballet, and I wasn't really encouraged to dabble in anything else or explore any other interests. So I had this double life where I was listening to all this music for fun that I wasn't ever allowed to make.
Did your parents know?
Yeah, they knew. But as long as I practiced my sonatas and everything, it wasn't really a problem. But again, yeah, it wasn't until I ran into this, which at the time seemed like a pretty catastrophic failure, that I let myself try my hand at this other music world. I saw a bird with a painted face. It looked exactly like you wanted me to look. I recognized it from my way, and I knew just what to do.
Where do you hope this music brings you? What do you want to say? What do you want to do?
I hope that it enables me to continue to travel, to share with people, and get people moving. It's that kind of record, I guess.
Get people moving.
I wish so much that I was there in person. I think it's so funny to be doing an interview with NPR from London, from the BBC. But it's exciting.
Yeah, you're in a very historic place.
Yeah, well, my mother was a broadcaster for Radio Moscow, and I have these deeply embedded memories because we only lived there till I was about 7. And I think when I was like 3, 4, 5, she would bring me into the station with her, and so I'm very comforted by this environment.
Oh gosh, were those the days at Radio Moscow where they were saying, and now we'll hear from the Vladivostok Oil Refinery Choir singing...
No, she was a news broadcaster, I think, and she had a show on there called Folk Box, where she would do stories about folk music from all over the former Soviet Union. She would do a broadcast in special English, so I think that means slow.
Yes.
Like broadcasting in special English.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I learned a lot of English.
It's hard. You got that cold in your veins, like every day to say it's done.
Olga Bell, her new album, Tempo. Thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Randomness. I made it up, and now you want it.
And of course, we're remembering Muhammad Ali today. He died last night at the age of 74. We'll have more in the hour of our show to come. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon.
Is a sequence of some flashes in your face, colorful and commonplace. I guess we're that.
Definitely going to have to check out more of Olga Bell's music. Guys, stay with us because coming up next, it's Marketplace Weekend. Thanks for spending your weekend with Minnesota Public Radio News.
Support for news comes from the estate of Joan B. Krout, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR produce programming that meets the highest standards of public service, journalism, and cultural expression. And the law firm Cooley LLP, with offices in the U.S., Europe, and China. Cooley advises entrepreneurs, investors, financial institutions, and established companies around the world where innovation meets the law.
Programming is supported by Michigan Technological University, where researcher Thomas Werner is studying fruit fly genes in order to gain insight into human cancer. Online at mtu.edu.
How's this for contrast?
All right.
36 degrees
Whoa.
with drizzling fog in Duluth here in the Twin Cities. Currently sunny.
Hey, Beast
and
Mode.
66
How are you
degrees.
doing?
Things are going to be changing through the day.
I just got back.
Supported by Peace Coffee's Breakaway Blend, a floral and smooth coffee, hinting of early summer morning, sweet citrus, and flowers from the farmer's market, blended to clear away the clouds and carry you across the finish line. PeaceCoffee.com.
This is your Twin Cities forecast. Some peaks of sunshine this morning, and then clouds with isolated thunderstorms. Highs in the upper 60s, northwest winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. Tonight, partly cloudy this evening, then clearing overnight. Lows in the mid-50s, northwest winds 10 to 15. Sunny and warmer on Sunday with highs in the upper 70s, northwest winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. Skies should be clear Sunday night with overnight lows in the upper 50s.
Programming is supported by Bombshell, a boutique dedicated to fashion in sizes 14 to 24 on Grand Avenue in St. Paul and online at bomb-shell-boutique.com. Bombshell, for the woman with style and substance.
How do I want to do this?
Hi, I'm Lizzie O'Leary. On this Marketplace weekend, you get ready for vacation, pack your kids on the plane, and then...
Halfway through the flight, my youngest one, who I was holding, woke up and started screaming his head off. I held him, and all of a sudden, he just starts vomiting everything he had in his stomach.
That's the price you pay to be poolside in Maui. While you're there, do you email, text, call your boss, or use Slack with your coworkers?
Now we've got at least 10 categories of communication, and that noise is making it really hard
Only
to figure out who to
33K
talk to, how
triangles
to
like
talk to them,
this.
and when.
Plus, Esperanza Spalding takes the Marketplace quiz.
I didn't sing yet, so we built ourselves as a trio, and then we realized, wait a minute, we could charge as 4 people, but we're only 3. What if I learn how to sing?
It's all coming up on Marketplace Weekend.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Barbara Klein. Flags are at half-staff in Lexington, Kentucky, and condolences are pouring in from around the world following the death of boxing legend Muhammad Ali. He died yesterday at 74 after suffering respiratory problems, possibly exacerbated by Parkinson's disease. As NPR's Tom Goldman reports, Ali lived a dramatic life in and out of the ring.
Muhammad Ali won boxing's heavyweight championship 3 times in the 1960s and 70s. He beat fearsome fighters like Sonny Liston and George Foreman after being given little or no chance. He acted out an epic trilogy with Joe Frazier, winning 2 of their 3 fights. Along the way, Ali, born Cassius Clay, always reminded the world,
I am the greatest.
Ali was vilified in some circles for his refusal to enter the military during the Vietnam War and for joining the black separatist movement Nation of Islam. But ultimately, Ali was widely loved and respected, a man who drew adoring crowds around the world. Tom Goldman, NPR News.
Crews in Oregon are working to cool tankers from a Union Pacific train that derailed and burst into flames yesterday. They were transporting highly flammable Bakken crude oil. Oregon Governor Kate Brown says safety and preventing further damage are top priorities.
Steps have been taken to contain possible contamination and minimize damage to wildlands and water supplies.
Environmentalists are saying the derailment demonstrates the volatile Bakken crude should not be hauled by rail. The U.S. military is conducting at least 2 investigations into the deaths of 9 soldiers during a training exercise in Fort Hood, Texas, Thursday. They died after their truck was swept into rushing floodwaters. The Army confirms they were in the correct location for the training. French officials say 4 people have died in a week of severe flooding.
So a lot of this will probably be deleted.
17,000 homes in and around Paris are without electricity.
The Seine peaked Friday night at more than 20 feet over its normal level. On Saturday, Parisians came out to see their river. Today, there is no riverbank. Julien Perchet says he and his friends used to sit right here on the bank with their legs dangling over the edge.
Just drinking beer and see the sea. It was cool. I think I will do again.
But authorities warned it could take up to 10 days for the river to return to normal after swelling to its highest level in nearly 35 years. Paris's worst flood on record was in 1910 when the Seine swelled 27 feet over its normal level. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
U.S. citizens in South Africa are being warned to avoid upscale shopping centers in Johannesburg. The U.S. Embassy says new information indicates terrorist groups are planning attacks. This is NPR.
Support for news comes from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, dedicated to the belief that all lives have equal value and working with partners to help envision a world where every person has the opportunity to live a healthy, productive life at gatesfoundation.org.
From Minnesota Public Radio News, I'm John Wanamaker. The trust running Prince's affairs is asking a judge to allow them to hire entertainment industry consultants to handle Prince's work after his death. Tim Nelson has more.
Bremer Trust is acting as special administrator for the late music icon's estate, and a new order proposed to Carver County Judge Kevin Eide would let the trust hire entertainment industry experts. The filing says Bremer wants help with what it calls the management and preservation of wide-ranging intellectual property left by Prince. People close to Prince have said since his death that they believe he left a large catalog of unreleased music, possibly kept at a vault at Paisley Park. The order also concedes that the negotiations will have to be semi-private. It asks to limit the involvement of the court and Prince's heirs in the business dealings that present what the order calls unique challenges. The next hearing in the case is scheduled for June 27th. Tim Nelson, Minnesota Public Radio News.
An attorney for one of 3 men convicted of seeking to join the Islamic State group in Syria says he's disappointed by guilty verdicts. Murad Mohammed represents Mohammed Farah, who, along with the others, was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder overseas. It is the most serious charge and could mean a life sentence in prison when the men are sentenced. Mortenson Construction says it has received the certificate of occupancy for U.S. Bank Stadium. That's a major milestone in the billion-dollar 3.5-year project. The designation means that the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority, the Vikings, and their vendors can start moving into the building, preparing it for a grand opening this summer. Mortenson Vice President John Wood says they got the official sign-off from the city of Minneapolis a month and a half early.
We're on track right now for turning over the building, turning over the keys significantly earlier than our contract requires, but we've still got some work to do in the building. Frankly, the biggest job we got left is cleaning.
The building is set to host a grand opening the weekend of July 23rd and will host its first event, a pro soccer game, on August 3rd. The Vikings will play their first game there August 28th against the San Diego Chargers. This is Minnesota Public Radio News.
Marketplace Weekend is supported by Progressive Insurance, working to make progress for more than 75 years.
Every now and then, we get economic data that inspires a collective, wait, what? Among the people who watch this stuff. And that's pretty much the reaction to this month's jobs report, which came out on Friday. Only 38,000 jobs created in May, but the lowest unemployment rate since November of 2007. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and this is Marketplace Weekend, where the economy meets real life. It's not a great report. The percentage of Americans who are working shrank, but what we won't know for a while is whether this is a trend or a blip. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. It's an election year, of course. Europe is in the middle of figuring out whether it really wants to stay together, and global growth feels tenuous. This week, we're going both big picture and small bore. From those global economic questions to how you keep a toddler happy on an airplane on your summer vacation. As always, come share your stories with us at marketplace.org, on our Facebook page, or on Twitter. We're at MarketplaceWKND. We're going to kick things off the way we normally do by borrowing a couple of words from the world of finance and asking our panelists to go long and short. That is, bet on or against some topics in the world of news and business. And this week, we have Jonathan Capehart, an opinion writer at The Washington Post and contributor at MSNBC, and Marketplace's own Tracy Samuelson. Welcome to you both.
Man.
Hey, Lizzie.
Thanks very
We
much.
don't want
All right,
MSNBC.
Jonathan, you're the guest. This is your first time. I'm going to let you give us your long.
I'm going long on the Democratic campaign.
Oh, dear God.
For president, yes. No matter what happens on Tuesday,
Seriously.
even if Hillary Clinton clinches the nomination with the New Jersey primary and goes on to wallop Senator Bernie Sanders in California.
Like, they just made an article about clenching it.
He still has a ton of money and lots of enthusiasm to keep going all the way to the convention. It ain't over until they get to Philadelphia.
Yeah, is this about money or is this the principle of the thing?
I think it's both money and principle on Senator Sanders' part. I mean, this is a guy who, let's just, can we speak plainly here? He's not a Democrat. And so he describes himself as a democratic socialist who decided to run for president on the Democratic Party banner because that's the way he would get attention. So he has no loyalty to the Democratic Party. So you take that plus the fact that he is sitting on top of millions of dollars. It tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, the money is enabling the principles, right? Like
Yep.
he is saying he wants to affect the party platform, and the money is just a way for him to do that.
All right, Trace, I wanna flip to your long because I feel like it's the opposite of America. So go ahead.
I am long also in terms of length, distance, if you will. The tunnel that opened this week in Switzerland, a $12 billion project, 17 years it took to complete this tunnel, and yet that was actually on time and on budget. So the Swiss have done a major infrastructure project and completed it successfully.
In a very Swiss way. I feel like if this was something that was happening in the United States, first of all, we'd fight over it over like 6 or 7 years, and that probably wouldn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And the tunnel somehow also became, a symbol of European unity at a time when, walls are being discussed. It was everything all at once.
As you were talking about this and marveling at the Swiss, there in New York, the remake of Penn Station has been going on for just about the same amount of time.
Not only that, but we've been building a 2nd Avenue subway tunnel, which has taken
lifetimes.
Not lifetimes, but it is behind schedule.
Jonathan, I want to kick it to your short because I'm on this team with you.
Yeah, so I'm going short on original movies. And, we don't have them anymore. They're all what they're called these tentpole type franchises. So it's all about the sequel and the remake and action figures and comic book figures. I just watched Deadpool on my flight back from Italy. It was hilarious. And yet what we're seeing is those types of movies are taking over Hollywood, and that all the original movies are heading to cable.
Well, yeah, all those things have a built-in audience, so I think if you're laying out hundreds of millions of dollars to make the thing, it's almost a guaranteed return on investment. You know that there is an audience built in.
Yeah, and sometimes, the experience of going to the theater can be a really nice experience to go to the theater, and yet you look up and see what's playing. Most of my movie watching these days does happen on my laptop.
All right, Tracy, you get to take us out with a short.
Okay, my short is it's a little bit of a downer. I apologize in advance. So we have yet another report, Economic Outlook, this week from the OECD, based in Paris, which said growth in 2016 is going to be basically flat, same levels as 2015. But kind of more depressing, they said we're stuck in this slow growth trap, that we're at a point where the slow growth kind of begets slow growth. What I am short is, so they've said that the way out of this trap is basically for governments to spend. And so I'm not short that idea. I'm short the likelihood of that happening. We've heard sort of similar refrains from the IMF about warnings about slow growth, the need for action from policymakers. The central banks.
You're shorting Keynesianism.
No, I'm not shorting Keynesianism. What I'm shorting is not at all the idea that it should happen. It's just I'm short the execution.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Jonathan? I mean, you're in Washington. You follow politics. It seems to me like we do get these kind of policy prescriptions from places like the IMF, the OECD, and yet politicians go, meh.
There's a strange thing. There's either the lack of political will to make the tough decisions that would get things in balance or in line, or there is a willful ignorance of the impact of some of the prescriptions. We've got huge problems here in Washington, in our own backyard, with our own finances, that to ask anyone in Congress what they think about the global economy and what global institutions have to say about it, I mean, you might as well just ask the person next to you, where's the nearest unicorn?
Jonathan Capehart from the Washington Post and MSNBC, Tracy Samuelson here at Marketplace. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks.
But where is the nearest unicorn?
The Splendid Table, insightful conversation and real-world ideas for making the most of your life in and out of the kitchen. If you love to eat, find The Splendid Table on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app.
You're listening to Marketplace Weekend. Last weekend, of course, was Memorial Day weekend, which traditionally kicks off the summer travel season. As someone who used to cover transportation, I have done that thing where you stand in an airport with a TV crew and watch the chaos. We decided, though, to talk to you, not at you, and have a conversation about how you pull off successfully traveling with kids. And our Facebook page basically blew up with comments. Jen Logson's tip: don't be afraid to ask for help.
People tend to shut down and feel like they need to handle everything, and that they're on their own. People want to help you. They want to help, but they don't feel like they can reach out to help you. It's sort of insulting, maybe, possibly insulting to a mom to say, well, maybe you can't handle this. But as a mom, I just go, it's okay to not be able to handle it. Just ask for help. Kids are crazy. Like, you do what you can and ask for help when you need it.
Have you had that work particularly well? You wrote us about a plane trip, I think, while you were pregnant with your second?
Yeah, I was 6 months pregnant with my son, and I had a daughter. My daughter she's turning 3, so she was turning 2 actually at the time, because it was that week we were going up to Seattle. On our way back, though, I had a car seat with me for her to ride in the plane, and I have a rolling luggage, and I had her strapped to my back on a baby carrier, and I'm 6 months pregnant, and I go up to the desk, and I'm like, can I load early? Like, I'm just overwhelmed with stuff. And he's like, it's a really packed flight. Did you get early boarding passes? And there was a couple that was standing right next to the front gate, and they had early boarding passes, and they said, oh, she's part of our group. And it was not a problem. People were happy to help my house.
And while parking an iPad in front of your kid's face is a fairly popular solution, Grand Petersburg is actually not a fan.
We find it to be passive, and we like when our kids are engaged when we're traveling. If you have a book open and somebody says, look up and look at this, you don't have headphones on and you're not scrambling to hit pause. You look up, we're interacting, and we're also listening to audiobooks, and all as a family.
To travel by car, by plane, how do you do it?
Probably half and half.
I know that your older child is 6, boy or girl?
Boy, both boys.
Does he ever get, because he's old enough, does he ever get sort of like aware of what other kids are up to and say to you like, Dad, I want to play a video game on the plane?
Not at all.
Really?
The reason that works is because it's not something that is part of their life, so they don't miss it. Both my kids go to Waldorf School in Minneapolis, which is also screen-free.
I'm going to flip this around a little bit. So I don't have kids, and occasionally you will encounter on an airplane a grumpy person like me who, for whatever reason, didn't get enough sleep or what have you, and is not the most tolerant traveler around children. Are there things that you say or do in public, either to strangers or to your kids, to kind of ease the tension in those situations?
Yeah, I try to make jokes to people like that, and which people usually are pretty receptive to, and actually more sympathetic. I know there are grumpy people, and to be honest, I interact with other parents more. When I see a grumpy person interact with another family who's having a challenge on a flight where a kid is crying, and I just say, hey, remember, just hang in there. You're doing your best. We all know that. And, also make a joke like, that guy's a total expletive.
And, expletives also pop up when the best laid plans of traveling parents go awry, which is what Jerry Chang found out on his flight to Maui this week.
About halfway through the flight, my youngest one, who I was holding, woke up and started screaming his head off. He was crying for about 5 to 10 minutes. I held him, and all of a sudden, he just started vomiting everything he had in his stomach, and it soaked my sweatshirt. The rules sort of go out the window. We try to give them as much leeway as possible just to make them comfortable. We download all the movies. We give them all the sweet snacks, everything. All that planning, it's all great, but you have to realize that everything's out of your control. You might end up with a soaked t-shirt.
We got so many great responses to this question that we want to keep this conversation going for next week, but with a twist. Traveling with kids can also be really expensive. So are there ways you try to save money when you do it? Tell us at marketplace.org, on our Facebook page, or you can leave us a message by calling 1-800-648-5114. And yes, your voice might be used on the air. There's more Marketplace Weekend just ahead.
Programming on Minnesota Public Radio is supported by our members and by Pentair, the official sustainable water provider to the Minnesota Twins. You can learn more online at pentair.com.
A battle over health insurance has nearly 5,000 Alina nurses considering a strike.
We are committed to transitioning them to our corporate health plan.
This benefit package is something that we want to keep.
That story Monday on Morning Edition here on NPR News.
I'm Peter Sagal. Best way to deal with the week's news? Ignore it. Spend some time with musicians Esperanza Spalding, Jewel, Marky Ramone, and others. It's what we're doing on the News Quiz from NPR.
Wait, don't tell me coming up at noon today. If you can't catch it today, catch it tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock here on Minnesota Public Radio News. Tributes continue to come in for sports legend Muhammad Ali. President Obama says Ali shook up the world and the world is better for it. In a statement following the death of the boxing legend, Obama says Ali fought for what was right, stood with Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela when it was hard, and spoke out when others wouldn't. And the tributes also occurring overseas. Spectators at the English Derby, one of the biggest events in British horse racing, have honored Ali with a minute's applause before racing began. The applause took place soon after Queen Elizabeth arrived at Epsom Racecourse. Ali, of course, died last night in Arizona at the age of 74. This is Minnesota Public Radio News.
You're listening to Marketplace Weekend, where the economy meets real life. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Payday lending has long filled a very specific niche in our financial system, usually for people with low incomes or no bank account. They can borrow against their paychecks, often at exorbitant rates. This week, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau unveiled a new set of regulations meant to drastically change payday lending. Marketplace's Kimberly Adams has been covering this and joins me now. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, Lizzie.
Explain what these rules say.
It's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a 1,300-page proposed ruling, so there's a lot in there. But here's the big thing.
Get off me.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is saying if you want to give these super high interest loans, you have to make sure that people will actually have the ability to pay them back. They want these companies, these payday lenders, title loan lenders, anybody who does these high interest installment loans, anything like that, you're supposed to check and make sure that after people pay back their bill, the interest on top of it, that they still have money to live.
So, I mean, that seems pretty basic. Do consumer advocates think this is likely to help people who take out these loans?
So it's a mix. Some consumer activists are just super grateful that anything has been done because payday loans really affect the poor communities the most, communities of color, and can be really detrimental to people because people will get caught up in this cycle of getting another payday loan to pay back their previous payday loan and accruing interest, and it just goes nuts. And so a lot of consumer advocates and groups that support minority and poor communities are saying at least this is something. This ability to repay is an important thing to have. However, others are saying, well, look, they're still going to be charging this crazy high interest rate. They just have to do more paperwork in order to get these loans out to people to charge them crazy high interest rates, and therefore that's going to make these loans even more expensive. And the other side of it is one advocate to whom I spoke was saying, this is great, but it's going to make it so these payday lenders no longer have an incentive to even give these loans because it's going to cost them so much. And the CFPB didn't provide any alternatives. So where are people going to go?
Well, that's sort of the next question that I have here is, most things that are regulations have some kind of unintended consequence.
Flat faces.
And this one, I guess it raises the question of access to credit.
Exactly, and I was speaking to several people who work with banks and payday lenders, and they're saying these regulations as proposed are going to make it impossible for smaller payday lenders to even exist. It's just going to be too expensive. It's not going to be worth it to them. They're going to go out of business. The other thing is that larger banks are really complaining because they were hoping to see in these regulations some sort of opening to make it easier for the bigger banks to offer these small dollar loans, but that's not in these proposed rules. So they're pushing to say, hey, at least give us a space so that we can do this in a profitable way because we can lower the cost. That said, consumer advocates are saying we shouldn't have these high interest small dollar loans at all to begin with. The proposal is just a proposal. The CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is taking comments until September the 14th.
Marketplace's Kimberly Adams in Washington. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Brazil a fair amount on this show because it's in an ongoing economic and political crisis, and now, add to that, hosting the Summer Olympics. They're set to open in just a couple months. This week, Amnesty International in Brazil called on Rio de Janeiro's government to end what it called systemic use of force in the slums or favelas around the city. The government has been clearing some residents out of them prior to the games. From our partners at the BBC, reporter John Bithry went to visit one such community called Villa Autodromo.
We've come just a few minutes from the Olympic Park to yet another construction site and yet more feverish activity. Here, 2 roads are being widened and a new rapid transit busway is being put in. But the land alongside bears the scars of a battle between Rio's authorities and the residents of a small community which resisted the demolition of their homes to make way for the Olympics. Now, most of the 600 houses here have been knocked down, just rubble and trenches remain. A red crucifix marks the spot where one house stood.
Alright.
A few residents are still here. We're going to meet one of them inside the peach-coloured church,
shift, whatever, blah blah blah. Origin.
Provides welcome relief from the dusty air and construction noise outside.
Origin to geometry. Yeah.
Sandra Maria de Souza, a mother of 4, has lived in Villa Autodromo for more than 25 years. She told me how life changed once the land was earmarked for development.
It was so hard because we suffered so much psychological pressure, so many threats, as well as violence. Houses were demolished without warning. We suffered power cuts. We stayed here sometimes 1-2 days without water, without electricity. Lighting poles were removed from the street, leaving the street in darkness. The residents had to fix everything. Some made deals and others were forced to leave, but no one wanted to go. And now we are only 20 families.
Por isso nós chegamos a esse final com apenas 20 famílias.
Do you think that the Olympic Games is a higher priority for Rio and the authorities here than for many of its residents, like you?
Em todos os países por onde a Olimpíada passou, ela removeu comunidades.
In all countries where the Olympics has been hosted, whole communities have been removed. It's an event that does not include the poor people. Vila Autódromo will go down in history as the first community to resist the Olympic removal process. The Olympic Games was the perfect excuse to remove Vila Autódromo, which City Hall have been trying to remove for almost 30 years. The Olympic Games has provided the excuse and the money to remove Vila Autódromo.
Well, I'm having a walk round this site with Janaína Pinto, who is a research assistant in urban planning at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Janaína, what has gone on here? I mean, this has had a major impact on this community, hasn't it?
Actually, what happened here was a battle between two conceptions of city.
This doesn't look like leather,
you have
though.
people believing that a city is just an assemblage of individuals, and in the other side, you have people struggling to establish some of their rights preserved, and trying to talk about a society and trying to talk about politics in a public way, not only in a way to serve the economics of every aspect of this Olympics.
The authorities would say we needed to expand these roads. We're holding the Olympics. There are always going to be losers. What would your response be to that?
And then I would have to go back a little, because this struggle around this land has been on and on for over 50 years now. Because in the 70s there was a boom here, a real estate speculation boom, and in the 90s a left-wing politician that was a governor of the Rio de Janeiro state, Leonel Brizola, granted the use concession to these families that lived here, and then 20 years later the city hall wanted the land back. But it was not them to have back, because it belongs to the state. So we can pretend it started now and we are talking about a 2-year struggle, but it's not true. It's just something that was in the plan of the mayor even before he was a mayor, and these people was just on the way. They were just on the way.
For more, I've got John Bithry on the line now from Rio. Hi, John. How are you?
Hello, Lizzie. I'm very well, thanks.
What happens now to the people who were living in this favela?
Well, most of them, as you were hearing in the piece there, have left, but around 20 families have stuck it out through what they see as intimidation by the authorities to leave the lands. They are now being allowed to stay. Their existing homes inside the perimeter of the Olympic Park are going to be demolished, but work has already begun to build new homes for them. Just a few meters away, I saw the foundations for those homes when I was down there. The new settlement is going to be urbanised. That means it'll be sort of lifted from shantytown level. There'll be a proper access road, new power lines, other utilities, plus they're going to get a new sports field and cultural centre. That's the promise. And the mayor of Rio says that a new school may be built there, using in fact part of one of the arenas being used for Olympic events.
All of this is happening, in the backdrop of a government crisis and a recession. Is it accurate to say that a lot of these long-standing tensions between rich and poor, are they being exacerbated by the terrible economic state Brazil is in?
Sure, to a degree, yes. I think the Olympics has very much focused minds on the differences between rich and poor, particularly here in Rio, where they are so great, where you have the middle classes enjoying life down in the wealthier suburbs, where I am in Ipanema, in Leblon, along in Copacabana, enjoying the beaches, and then higher up on the hills, on the hillsides, the shanty towns, the favelas, where life is very much harder, and a lot of people in these favelas think that with the spending going on in the Olympics, a lot of the pacification programs that have been going on, so work to reduce the violence, to improve life in these favelas, a lot of that money has been diverted, and a lot of this work
it's easier to get rid of them than it is
yes, I think a lot of that is being talked about at the moment.
John Bithry from our partners at the BBC in Rio de Janeiro, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Marketplace Weekend is supported by Progressive Insurance, small business protection for more than vehicles with specialized coverages to protect against financial loss. More at progressivecommercial.com. The Splendid Table, insightful conversation and real-world ideas for making the most of your life in and out of the kitchen. If you love to eat, find The Splendid Table on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app.
You're listening to Marketplace Weekend, and even though it is the weekend, I'm willing to bet that you can't entirely escape your work when you're not there. Because now we have email, texts, and programs like the messaging app Slack, where you can stay in constant and sometimes unrelenting touch with your colleagues. And that, perhaps predictably, has led to something we're calling Slacklash. That is, people in companies who've gotten overwhelmed by all this communication and are rebelling. To talk about all this, we brought in Susan Lamott. She founded Exequio HR, which is a workplace consulting company. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we've seen a bunch of articles lately and people saying, I'm giving up Slack. I don't want to communicate this way anymore. It seems as if there's a rebellion against workplace, instant messaging. Why do you think this is happening?
I think the biggest reason it's happening is because there's so much noise now that's impeding us from getting actual work done. Years ago, there were only a few ways to communicate, phone and in person, and then we added email. Now we've got at least 10 categories of communication, and then all of these different tools within those categories. And that noise is making it really hard to figure out who to talk to, how to talk to them, and when.
Well, what have you seen about who prefers to communicate sort of which way and how?
So there's two real reasons, I think, that drive communication style. The first is what I would call sort of senior-most or VIP communication. So at the end of the day, even if you like using a tool like chat or Slack or whatever it is, if your CEO or your senior-most client doesn't want to talk or chat that way, you have to defer to their method of communication. So that drives one method of communication. The other is work style. What I see a lot is that depending on the type of worker you are, how you behave, how you like to get things done, that might drive your actual choice of communication method. So for example, I'm a very task-oriented person. I move very quickly. So I love talking to clients on instant message or to text them on my phone. Others prefer to marinate on things, take their time. So for them, sometimes email or even in-person conversations are better because they have time to think and prepare.
I went into this thinking that the differences would be generational or maybe based on industry, but that's not what you're seeing?
Certainly, I think generations are driving the use of more popular technologies because certainly we know Gen Y, Gen Z, they're just more comfortable with technology than baby boomers or the silent generation are. But that doesn't mean that certain technologies are unique to those generations. In more traditional Fortune 500 companies, they're still deferring primarily to email, mostly because of cultural nuances and because that's what they're used to, and that's the behavior in the organization of how work gets done.
Okay, I want you to put on your consultant hat for a second, because in preparation for talking with you, my producer Eliza and I evaluated the different ways in which our team communicates. So we're half on the East Coast and half on the West Coast, and we Slack, we have Google Docs, email, we use WebEx, we have phone calls. How would you kind of address that if you came in to work with us?
Well, first it's figuring out what your primary tasks are during the day. If you're a radio show producer, for example, speed and time are of the essence. So I'd look first at what are the things that are urgent that have to happen during the day, and what are the best communications for those urgent tasks. For other things, stories or series that you might be working on over time, where you're talking to a number of different guests, doing interviews to build something up, then you might want to look at communication tools that allow for tracking of information. With chat, for example, it's really hard to make sure everyone sees it. But with email or even online project management tools, it's a lot easier to track notes and then directly point people back to those things. So I always recommend you start with what kind of work do you do, and what are the things that drive that work?
Shoot.
Is it speed? Is it time? And how much time do you have to actually get it done?
I also am curious about the fact that the way we communicate with our colleagues seems to be, at least in these modern applications, mimicking some of the ways we communicate with our friends. That it's more casual, that tools like Slack or others, you can embed GIFs and emojis. I wonder if we are blurring the lines between professional and personal, and what that means.
My friend Jason Seiden runs a company called Brand Amber, has a great term he uses called profersonal. And it is this idea that those lives are continuing to cross. And I think the responsibility of our organizations is to recognize the nature of our professional lifestyles now and to put some guardrails around that. What's appropriate, what's not. There's this, I think, unique desire with company cultures to sort of be cool and have just a couple of core values and let employees decide what's right and what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's not. But in all of the workforce research we do at Exacquio, employees tell us all the time, and this is employees of all generations, that they actually want rules. They want guardrails because it's so much easier when the organization says it's not appropriate to send gifts in company communication than it is for them to tell their friends or colleagues that that's the case. So it really falls to organizational culture to say, hey, here's what we value, and here are some of the work rules or behaviors around those values. And that can kind of help ensure that we are still moving forward, but it still allows us to have some guardrails around how we do it.
So, assuming, if we will, that public radio is going to be around in 5 years, how do you think I'm going to be communicating with my team in 5 years?
I think you'll be communicating primarily through your mobile device for your everyday work. Quick conversations that you want to have, whether it's getting approval for something, whether it's trying to schedule an interview. And then I think we will still see some form of email or a merge of email and chat. So companies like Slack that are managing these kinds of quote-unquote project management tools will be enabling more opportunities to actually track conversations.
Susan Lamont, founder of Exacquio HR, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not sure these should be this size anymore. That's my own fault. Might as well fix it later.
There's more Marketplace Weekend just ahead. Programming is supported by the College of St. Scholastica, debuting its new MBA in Leadership and Change Management. Evening classes start September in Duluth, St. Paul, and St. Cloud. css.edu/MBA.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
CSS.
The riveting case of a
What?
Russian dissident found dead on a road in England. His stomach, traces of a poisonous fern.
We're talking about suburban England and a fern that comes from the Himalayas being used. It's not growing in your or my back garden.
Find out more on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered starts this afternoon at 4 o'clock, weekdays at 3 here on Minnesota Public Radio News. Stay with us for the Best of Car Talk coming up after 11 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, it's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And at 1 o'clock, This American Life. This afternoon at 5 o'clock, it's a Prairie Home Companion with a live show from the Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder among the guests. This is Minnesota Public Radio News.
You're listening to Marketplace Weekend, where the economy meets real life. I'm Lizzie O'Leary.
On this show, we've been airing chunks of the new Marketplace podcast, The Uncertain Hour, which looks at welfare and welfare reform 20 years later. It's hosted by my colleague, Chrissy Clark. This week's episode of The Uncertain Hour focuses on what we talk about when we talk about welfare and where the welfare money goes. It's not always what you think. Here's Chrissy Clark.
All right, so we're going to talk about love styles.
It's a Thursday night in Oklahoma City, and I'm in a crowded conference room.
Love styles, right?
At the front, there's a guy with a white goatee and a polo shirt.
Let me ask you something.
His name is Scott Roby, and he's pointing at a slide with the image of a big, colorful heart on it. The heart's divided up into different quadrants, labeled with different love styles.
There's do, be, give, encourage, talk, and touch. Those are the 6 different dimensions or love styles. And we all have all of these within us.
But Scott says in every person, 1 or 2 love styles really rise to the top. Like if you're a doer, actions are an expression of love.
Maybe cooking a meal, doing a chore of theirs that they typically do, doing a load of laundry. Oh, I said the L word, but yeah. You know, something like that.
The audience is leaning in now. People are nudging each other, giving knowing looks when their love style comes up.
Sensual touch, if it's really going to feed the love style and feed the relationship, it's not always about landing the plane.
What's going on? Shit.
Scott's audience, mostly young or middle-aged professionals, are dressed in their business casual clothes, most headed to this room right after work. And everyone in here is either married or engaged. In fact, that's the whole reason why they're here. It's a free class called Forever for Real.
Make your forever for real.
Open to any couple who lives in Oklahoma, a kind of marriage counseling 101 to help them improve their relationships and build strong marriages, and dance to a little Al Green, draw pictures of what a modern marriage looks like.
We're drawing a bicycle to show all the different phases of a relationship.
At the break, over Chex Mix and pizza, I mingle with some of the couples.
I'm Trey Martin.
Trey works in biotech. His fiancée,
Lori Radford,
is a paralegal. They met online. They're getting married in April. Heard about this class at a bridal show. And as they've just discovered, they're quite compatible when it comes to love languages. Thank goodness.
Touch.
Bingo. Touch.
Well, that's nice to have the same love language. Okay, so I should probably tell you what I'm doing here in this marriage class. I am actually newly married myself, and I think touch is probably one of my preferred love styles too. Also, encouragement. But I was at this Forever for Real class in Oklahoma City for a different reason. To ask couples like Trey and Lori 2 questions. Okay, a question that is going to sound like it's out of left field, but there's a reason I'm asking it. How do you feel about government assistance and welfare in this country? Do we spend enough, too much, not enough? Lori did not skip a beat.
I think too much.
And you feel like too much why?
Because I think that the people who receive it, a lot of those people don't try to go find jobs. A lot of them just sit at home and they're not looking to better themselves.
And then I asked the second question. What if I told you that this class is funded by the welfare program? Trey and Lori look at each other, and this kind of amused panic spreads over Trey's face.
Oh my God, we're on welfare. I never thought I'd be on welfare. Well, that's great.
Oklahoma is just one of many states across the country where 20 years after welfare reform, tens of millions of welfare dollars are going to things that surprise even the people who are benefiting from them. And not just those people. Even policy wonks like Devon Douglas of the Oklahoma Policy Institute are surprised by how her state spends welfare money, or, as it's officially known, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF.
When I bring this up in conversation with my friends, when I can't stop nerding out about my job, there's kind of a quizzical look on their face, and they think, oh, is the government like doing a matchmaking service? Like, does TANF help Tinder? Like, how does this work exactly? People just don't think that TANF is about getting people married.
But for others in Oklahoma, this makes perfect sense.
at the most basic level, a two-income family was more likely to take people out of poverty than a one-income family.
Mary Myrick is the president of Public Strategies, the for-profit public relations firm that runs Oklahoma's marriage initiative. Since 2001, her company has received more than $70 million in welfare money to run these marriage classes. The whole idea took hold in Oklahoma in the late 90s, when a report was commissioned by the state to look at why Oklahoma had one of the lowest per capita incomes in the country. The report pointed to the state's high divorce and out-of-wedlock pregnancy rates as possible causes. Right around the same time, welfare reform was kicking in, and the new system of block grants that gave states a lot of flexibility in terms of how they could use federal welfare dollars. Here's Kendi Cox, who also works at Public Strategies.
And so our governor at the time met with our Department of Human Services and said, why don't we use a very small portion of that money to try some innovative things to strengthen families as a way to say, you know, we spend in government so much time, so many resources dealing with the fallout of the family. Perhaps we should do some things on the prevention side.
And the Oklahoma Marriage Initiative was born. Some classes target low-income people, but most are open to everyone, rich, poor, and in between.
We're also providing an opportunity for anybody in the state of Oklahoma to access services that really can bolster not only their relationship, but their ability to stay self-sufficient and avoid poverty if they are, you know, middle income people.
But the fact that all of these programs are funded by welfare dollars has become a growing concern to state lawmakers in Oklahoma, Democrats and Republicans. Because while the money's going to lots of families who don't consider themselves especially needy, the state is also full of families who are by any measure very needy, but aren't getting any cash welfare at all. In Oklahoma, just 7 out of every 100 families living in poverty receive cash assistance.
I want to dig into those numbers a little bit now with Chrissy Clark and with Slate Senior Economics Correspondent Jordan Weissman. Slate and Marketplace are collaborating here. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
Chrissy, were you surprised by what you found in Oklahoma?
Yes, is the short answer. Yeah, and you know, amazingly, even some of the state legislators who I talked to in Oklahoma were surprised by how the money does and doesn't get spent in Oklahoma, the TANF block grant money. And that's the crazy thing. It's like the irony of when we turned this program into a block grant was to give more control over to states, but no one is necessarily keeping track. In Oklahoma's case, it's pretty much just an executive branch and administrative decision how this welfare money, these federal welfare dollars get spent, and there's not a lot of legislative involvement. So I think a lot of people in Oklahoma were like, oh, okay, this is where the money goes, and these are the people who are not getting it that we thought were getting it.
Jordan, how does that experience in Oklahoma mirror national welfare spending?
It's pretty similar to what we've seen in a bunch of different states. I mean, the thing about the welfare system now is we don't really have a single welfare system. We have 50 different ones because of block granting. But if you look nationwide, right, about
probably didn't need some of that.
Of the welfare budget nationwide goes to what's called other non-assistance, according to the Center for Budget Policy and Priorities. And that's just a grab bag of things that include, you know, expenses like the adoption system or the, you know, child protective services systems in some states. They spend a massive amount of their budget on it. In Arizona, for instance, they spend more than half on, you know, their essentially child services, and that instead of what we think of as, you know, welfare, basic cash assistance.
Chrissy, one of the ideas behind block grants was, gee, a local government or state government might know better what its citizens need. Do block grants work?
Yeah, I think that was really the idea, that, you know, states could take this money and really customize what their local economy, what the families in that local economy needed. But especially in budget crunches, which Oklahoma is in right now, I think they're $1 billion short. There's lots of states that are facing this. this block grant money becomes what one woman I talked to called the pretty money. There's not a lot of strings attached to it. And so the original intent of that money, which was to help struggling families with children meet their basic needs, to provide a safety net for people who've hit really hard times, to help get them back into the job market, that intent has kind of been lost as all of these other interests say, this is free federal money that we can use. Let's put it towards this project or that. And as worthy as that project might be, it's not what we think the money would be going to, given that it's called welfare.
Jordan, you wrote that this is a zombie system and not a bridge from poverty to work, which was the goal. What happened to that goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, states were given very, very loose guidelines about how they could use the money. TANF was created in the middle of the 90s, tech boom and the kind of surging economy where employment was easy to find. And for a variety of reasons, the welfare rolls fell without the states having to do quite so much work to help people find jobs. And, they also kind of reduced their roles by keeping people from enrolling in the first place or qualifying in the first place. And slowly over time, money got put to other, or not even that slowly, but over time, money got put to other uses. Things like, these marriage programs in Oklahoma or, funding child welfare systems that otherwise have been grossly underfunded in some states. And legislators have kind of treated the program as a slush fund. And that is hard to square with using that money to get people into work.
Jordan Weissman from Slate, Chrissy Clark from Marketplace, thank you both very much.
Thanks so much, Lizzie.
Thanks so much.
Man.
Marketplace Weekend is supported by Progressive Insurance, with insurance for cars, home, boat, motorcycles, RVs, and commercial vehicles at 1-800-PROGRESSIVE and Progressive.com. The Splendid Table, insightful conversation, and real-world ideas for making the most of your life in and out of the kitchen. If you love to eat, find The Splendid Table on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app.
You're listening to Marketplace Weekend. No matter who you are, you probably had a bad day at the office that changed your perspective. Or maybe you made an impulse purchase you really, really wish you could take back. This week, musician Esperanza Spalding sat down with our producer Raghu Manavalan to take the Marketplace quiz. That's our questionnaire based on experiences with work and money.
Oh, what?
My name is Esperanza Spalding, and I don't like to describe
Oh, no,
myself.
no. This is NPR News. I like to listen to music and listen to the news when I'm working. This is a project for myself.
What's coming to mind?
Let me pause this. I'll turn it down.
That you can't really trust.
This is a project for myself, basically. Ew.
If your boss in the office says this is not a good article, I need you to rewrite it for this reason, and then
give me 1 minute.
You go, oh, okay, I'm gonna trust my boss, and also I'm accountable to him.
Where's?
In music or in art.
No, wait,
and
where is my?
In a way that's sort of insulated from other people's feedback.
No.
And hold yourself accountable to the standard that you believe in. That sounds really nice, but it's actually very, 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 very challenging to keep in touch with that compass when a lot of other
I guess it is around the right color. Okay. The project is for myself. Basically, I'm creating Greek mythology models.
What is something you bought that you now completely?
But eventually, it will turn into a game.
So many things. I feel like everything that I've
Actually,
ever ordered on Amazon, I don't understand. I love Amazon, but I never use what I buy. It's crazy. I feel like half my bookshelf is just stuff that I want.
And you can learn. Here's our Facebook page. Some people help, some people don't. That was a weird way of putting it. Sometimes I get people that want to help on it. Like somebody recently made the Trojan horse, which I recently unwrapped. Let me see if I can find that texture.
I didn't sing yet, so we pulled ourselves as a trio, and then we realized.
So he made a Trojan horse for it. Oh, I gotta move that up. I mean, move this up here. I recently unwrapped it. This needs to be unwrapped better, but for the most part, I'm just doing various models for. This is me learning Blender cycles, the texturing part. Let's go down further.
older.
So
And at one point, my boss pulled me aside and he said, you know,
what was I
you can't
saying?
keep missing work to do gigs. You're gonna have to choose. And
Uh,
I realized, like,
it's
wow, I have been earning money.
mainly I'm just creating the models so that I have something to show to potential employers. I was at some point, which it might be down here. Why can't I go down further? Alright, let me go to my own Epic Quest Gaming. This has a little bit more information. At one point I was actually creating the game design, like I was creating the Unity
That was my first real job. I fell asleep as
the
my boss was telling
HUD,
me things 'cause I just
the camera, moving the character and everything, and I spent like 3 weeks on doing it, and then they did an update and it kind of broke something, and I think I broke it even more, and it was kind of like I spent 3 weeks doing nothing. So now what I'm doing is like I had the idle pose and all this other crap. You could walk around, you could get hurt, sort of. At least it would lose health on the bar, which is mainly like the functions that you need. So it didn't show the reactions, but they could happen. I had a lot of problems with this. I don't know why all the weights were showing. Where is it? That's okay. Well, another one, I have it where you can actually see the mana going down or the health going down and back up. And then I broke the thingy looking around. Ooh, I don't remember that sword. I wonder if I still have it. Oh, Alex made it. That's cool. Anyway, yeah, so right now you could say it's for myself. There is a blueprint if you'd like to see. Greek blueprint. I think that's it. Let me see. Yeah, that's it. Of what we are going to be doing, like how the game is supposed to be. But right now I'm just doing models. And there's also a poll. I don't know if you're interested in doing a poll to see which one comes next. Right now the most people want Odysseus, and then I believe it's Prometheus. And then maybe it's Athena. I don't remember. But I'm kind of just doing like what people want to be done. Oh, cool. What projects are you working on? Eventually, it's supposed to be a huge single-player game, and then it'll turn into multiplayer. But I mean, that whole project, just single-player alone, would take like 2 years, especially working alone 3-4 years. It's not something I could do alone. So I'm just doing models. And then I'll put it on the website that I've created, and I'll have to redo that website too. But right now I'm just working on Odysseus, the warrior. Even though this looks really stupid, I'm kinda wondering if I should be. Working on high scale -1.
From charming downtowns to untouched wilderness, pine forests to bluff country and historic sites to modern attractions.
Cool.
Plan your Minnesota vacation at exploreminnesota.com
wait a minute.
and share your adventures with hashtag.
Yeah, good. This is exactly what I wanted. Yeah, what are you working on, man?
Sunshine this morning, and then clouds with isolated thunderstorms.
Ew.
Highs in the upper 60s, northwest winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. Tonight, partly cloudy. This evening, then clearing overnight.
I'll just have to
northwest winds 10 to 15. Sunny and warmer on Sunday with highs in the upper 70s, northwest winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. Skies
wait.
clear Sunday night with overnight lows in the upper 50s.
Toxic algae blooms can make our lakes unsafe for swimming. Some Minnesota cabins have septic systems that leak sewage into bodies of water. The resources we take for granted are at risk. Learn what's at stake at nprnews.org/environment.
Are these actually
Support for the
straight?
best of Car Talk on NPR comes from NPR, NPR member stations, and Angie's List. For 20 years, Angie's List has striven to provide consumers with
They are
transparency
now, sort
and
of.
services. Online reviews and hiring tools are at angieslist.com. And Lumber Liquidators, a proud sponsor of NPR, offering more than 400 styles, including hardwood, bamboo, laminate, and vinyl, with flooring specialists in hundreds of stores nationwide.
But yeah, what kind of projects are you working on?
1-800-HARDWOOD. Hello and welcome to Car Talk from National Public Radio with us, Click and Clack, the Tappet Brothers, and we're broadcasting this week from the cryptography department here at Car Talk Plaza.
Now, I know you don't read them, but there are such things as personal ads.
Now, I don't read them.
And for those people who do read them, we have here a handy dictionary to decipher what they I mean, a lot of times it's a little quick.
Everything's abbreviation. Because they're
It's mostly code, and you have to know how to decipher.
well, and they're designed so that outsiders can't read them. You have to read them.
That's true. Well, and possibly, and you like this, to obfuscate.
Right up my alley.
Here's what various things mean. For women's ads, 40-ish means 49. Emotionally secure.
This is going to be tough. If I could do an array for this, that'd be great.
And of course, Rubenesque, we know, means
And I'm pretty sure I could.
means very fat. Men's ads.
Alright. Shift L.
Everyone's 6'2". Right. They're all 6'2". But if it says athletic, watches a lot of NASCAR races. Huggable. Fat. Mature.
Let's make the hat.
And stable. Arrested for stalking, but probably not convicted. So, I mean, you have to be careful. If you ever should find yourself in a situation where you have to respond or be interested in those.
That's
persons.
weird.
Well, I'm glad to know the lingo.
Sure.
Anyway, if you'd like to decipher your car problem,
that's what this is about.
or anything else, give us a call. Exactly.
What
You
the-
can use all the abbreviations and obfuscations that you'd like.
Yeah.
The number is 888-CAR-TALK. That's 888-227-8255. Hello, you're on Car Talk.
Hello, this is Amy from Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts.
Hi, Amy.
Are you 40-ish?
There we go.
Don't let my husband know. Actually,
By the way, I always thought women should lie about their age in the other direction.
Yeah.
make him older.
I always do. I always tell people I'm 75, and they say, "Gee, you look good for 75."
Yeah, but they don't say anything. You're
Shift D.
I'm 75.
Oh yeah,
I knew that.
Why is it? It keeps like merging or something.
No, that's fine. I have with my partner, actually, not my husband. I have a 1988 Honda
Shift
Civic
D size out.
that we bought about 3 months ago, and it has about 146,000 miles on it. So the guy we bought it from is supposedly anal. It turns out that he actually goes to the same mechanic that we go to. So we had a great recommendation of him. He had replaced everything, timing belt, water pump, blah, blah, blah. And he'd replaced the clutch 3 years ago. Now here's where we get into problems. Because now something is not working with the shifting mechanism.
What does it do?
Well, it doesn't shift half the time. Half the time it's fine. Half the time you're driving along and you're cruising along, and if you press the clutch just right, you're cool. But the actual clutch pedal engages almost when you're at the floor, and sometimes you feel like you have to press through the floor to engage it. You know, like just a little bit harder.
Yeah, actually, you're disengaging it when you're doing it.
Disengaging it.
Okay, that's all right.
So disengaging it.
And the other direction, when you're taking your foot off the clutch to start from a dead stop, does the car start moving when the clutch is like an inch off the floor?
Alright, now we want to do an array.
Other times it's perfectly okay.
Most of the time, it's not okay. And
Whoa.
It's just not okay.
What the?
Most of the time, particularly when you're downshifting down to first, I basically have to muscle it in.
Well, muscling it in is not good because ultimately that will damage, if not the shift linkage, it will damage the transmission itself.
Right.
And I believe the problem is in the clutch.
Okay.
Now I'm going to ask an important question here that we should know the answer to, but maybe you...
This is kind of a curve.
Hydraulic clutch.
Have a hydraulic or a cable? I think it has a cable clutch.
I think it has a. I hope it has a cable clutch.
I think it has a cable clutch.
Good. Well, we're going with your answer.
Great. Yeah, that's great to know.
Okay.
Because that makes it very simple.
And has your mechanic looked at it to try to...
He hasn't yet opened it up because we're scared. I mean, my partner and I were nervous because he said that it's about a $500 job.
No, it isn't going to be a $500.
Oh, see, Tommy thinks you need a cable.
I do think that.
Yeah.
And what's happening is that the clutch is not disengaging. I mean, you may need a new clutch because if it's never disengaging, then it's wearing out all the time.
Man.
But I don't think so. I think you just need an adjustment.
Well, he's adjusted a couple of times.
And when he has adjusted it, has it improved?
A little bit, yeah, for a time.
A little bit.
Well, it's possible that the cable is stretching, so when he adjusts it, it's okay for a while, and then the cable continues to stretch.
I mean, it might be all broken. I would certainly start by replacing the cable. Wouldn't you?
Well, I would start by having the guy look under the dashboard to see if the mechanism to which the cable is attached. The cable is ultimately attached to the pedal, but the pedal pivots on an entire bracket. And if that bracket were breaking, it would give you the same kind of feeling you would get from a stretching clutch cable.
Okay.
Now, if that seems to be okay, then you can go ahead and pull the cable out. And usually, if it's fraying, you can see it at either end.
Okay.
And if neither one of those things fixes it, then he's going to have to take the transmission out.
That's what we know. This
Oh,
is
come on,
supposed to be a
suck
good,
it up.
cheap, fast car.
Good luck, Amy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
1-888-CAR-TALK. That's 888-227-8255. Hello, you're on Car Talk.
Hi, this is Bob from Alexandria, Virginia.
Hi, Bob. Are you a lawyer or a politician?
No comment.
Okay, we'll talk to you anyway. He might be.
Bob,
He might be both.
we can't tell you whether the answer we're going to give you is for sure, for maybe, or for baloney. So, but let's continue.
Okay, the problem is I have this Fiat.
Yeah? A Spider?
Yes,
Yeah.
1982, and it has two problems. I think they're related. Every time I turn on the lights, the engine stalls. And every time I put on the brakes, the turn signals don't work.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, they are related.
Yeah, I just got the car back from the shop. I had a bunch of, had it repainted and everything, and it didn't do it before then, and now it's doing it now.
I used to have this very car.
Really?
Well, he never had these problems because his headlights nor his brake lights ever worked. So he couldn't have had this problem. I mean, my first reaction when you say you turn the headlights on, in fact, we used this as a puzzler years ago. You're driving along at night, the thing begins to run lousy, the engine's missing, you turn the headlights off, and the thing runs fine.
Yes.
And the reason that would happen is that your charging system is not working. In other words, the alternator is not producing enough current to run the headlights and the spark plug.
I checked the voltage in the ignition system, and it seems to be fine, lights on or lights off.
What do you mean? What do you check at the battery?
At the coil.
Oh, forget the coil.
Coil ain't gonna tell you.
What do you got at the coil? You got
Okay,
12
we have a
volts right
curve.
there. Well, that's not good enough.
No, actually a little higher than that, like 13 or something.
Well, you should have 14.
Yeah.
But 13.
That's what he's got. He's a lawyer. You want 14 or 14? Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
So, and then your other symptom is a classic.
Yeah.
Because the little flasher relay that actuates the directionals is very voltage sensitive. In fact, in many cases, the signal that there's something wrong with your charging system is that your directionals stop flashing or they go very, very slowly.
Tell us about the accident.
There was no accident, I just got it repainted, and he took off all the trim and the taillights and the headlights and
How
everything.
bad was the rust?
Yeah,
definitely not going on the curve.
The delicate balance of electrons which we're able to get from one place to another. I would run myself a nice heavy ground strap
Mirror,
engine to the body of the car.
modifier, blender, curve, duplication along curve. Wait, is it an array or is it a mirror modifier?
Provide a nice clean path for the electrons to get back to the battery, and you might solve all these problems.
You will solve all these problems.
Yeah.
How do you like the car?
Oh, it's a great car.
See, I sold my Fiat.
And a curve modifier.
We had a bet going that if he made it all the way back home, which was Chicago, that he would pay me the full amount. Otherwise, he would pay me some proportion of my asking price, which was $22,000. Depending on the proportion of the 1,000 miles that he made. And he was honest because he paid me the whole $22,000 because he made it all the way. Nothing fell off, no pieces fell off, but Joe decided to rebuild this car, and it has never run since. It's now in a box.
Yeah, and it wasn't $22,000. Lira.
Oh, Lira! That was it.
Hey, see you, Bob. Thanks for your call.
Thank you. Thanks for the tip. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. 1-888-CAR-TALK. That's 888-227-8255. A lawyer on Car Talk.
Hi, this is Nancy from Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Yes.
Now, I've been in Florida a few times. I've never seen no stinking pine trees.
Well, you have to come to the southeast part. We're between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Cool. What's up, Nancy?
Okay. Well, my husband and I are having a discussion. As it were.
Fight.
Yeah. And well, he drives our Geo Prism.
I always tell my kids, your mother and I are having a discussion.
And I drive the Plymouth Sundance, which is okay with us. That's not the problem. Okay. And we were in the Plymouth Sundance one day, and he was driving, and we were tootling along, and he noticed that the lever on the air conditioner was in the recirculate position.
Which is where it should be.
Except that he said to me, do you drive like that all the time? And I said, yeah, because it cools the car better. And he said, it's not a good idea to drive for long periods with that recirculate lever on because of the possibility of exhaust fumes seeping into the passenger compartment.
Yes, it's a little known fact that the air conditioner is powered by the exhaust from the vehicle.
Yeah, so I sort of poo-pooed that, and so then he said, no, it's really true. And in fact, he said it could be so dangerous that you could die. And so we both think we're right, you see, because I say that's ridiculous, and he says that's true. So we thought we would go to car court and the Judge Wapners of public radio.
That's us.
Yep.
Okay, we'll tell you a couple of whoppers right now. Oh, Wapner.
Can you settle this for us?
Of course we can.
I knew it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with every one of these wacko stories about cars. Has some basis, and I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out what could have been the genesis of this crazy tale that your husband has told you.
He said he read it somewhere.
Well, indeed, first of all, let's go back 4 or 5 steps. By the fact that by keeping it on recirculation, you do cool the car faster, and it probably even mentions that in your book. Because when you run recirculate, you pretty much recirculate the air that's in the car, and if you're taking the air that starts off at 100 degrees and you cool it down to 90, 80, 70, you'll get there much faster by cooling the air that's already
That's pretty cool.
off, as opposed to taking fresh air from the outside all the time and exhausting that air you just cooled off.
Right.
However, when you have it on recirculate, you do not shunt off the outside air completely. Whether you have it on recirculate or not, you are always getting some outside air coming in.
Okay.
You're always getting some outside
And
air.
by the same token, when you have it on outside air, you're not getting 100% outside air.
That's right.
Both of these positions mean mostly.
Yeah, I'm getting the smell of the car in front of me, which I don't like.
Correct, but you're still getting it, except it's not strong enough when you're on recirc.
So you are perfectly within your constitutional rights.
Absolutely.
To leave it on recirculate.
Oh boy.
the constitutional right now to also tell your husband that he's nuts. And that's even better, isn't it? Now, before you just spring this on him, Nancy.
Yeah.
I'd cook him a nice dinner first.
Be careful. Men have very fragile egos, as you know.
Yes, I do know.
So,
And I predicted his first reaction will be, those jerks don't know what they're talking about. That will be his first reaction.
always be on the offensive
Yes.
when you know you're in big trouble.
Right.
I will be so sweet when I say to him that he's nuts. I will.
Yeah.
I promise.
Be extra careful.
And Nancy, I can tell that you're just the person to be that sweet.
Yes,
You sound like
I will.
a wonderful person.
I will. I promise.
Despite the fact that you said, oh boy, say it again.
Can I hang up now so I can call him?
Yeah, you can. Bye, Nancy, thank you. She wins the prize today. She's the best. That old boy, I want that caption forever. Oh boy.
All right, Tommy, look, to help you remember last week's puzzler, I'm going to ask you a few fill-in-the-blank kind of questions.
Go right ahead.
Ready? Now, each of these words is a hint. So here's your first hint. Uncle Nunzio used to run blank.
Numbers.
Of course. And, are you ready for the next one? Your IOUs aren't worth the blank they're printed on.
Paper.
Good.
I'm doing good.
And if you ever get an answer right on this show, it's purely a matter of blank.
Luck?
It's close enough. I was looking for chance.
All right, so those are the clues that I'm supposed to figure out the puzzle now?
No, those were just kind of random thoughts I was having. Yes, the puzzle was about numbers, paper, and chance, and I'll have the answer in just a minute. I still don't remember.
It ain't right, niggas still in the left lane. You're backing up, traffic, you all need a shame. So get out of my way, 'cause I'm passing you by. You're going too damn slow and I wanna fly. You want the Hollywood, you wanna open your heart. If you ain't going anywhere, then why even start? You're like a 10.
Whoa, what? Cursor to selected.
Support for Car Talk and NPR comes from our new Instant Tan in a can. Available in 5W30. And for my brother's Southern Italian look, 20W50. From NPR and NPR member stations and
Fifth Generation Incorporated, maker of Tito's handmade vodka, still independently owned by Tito Beverage, distilled and bottled in Austin, Texas, American made and gluten-free. Recipes and more at Tito'sVodka.com. And the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, working to improve the quality of people's lives by supporting the performing arts, environment, medical research, and child well-being.
Okay, I tried. Let's
and even though the National Weather Service reports a huge mass of hot air right over network headquarters,
just try something different.
This is NPR.
Programming is supported by Flint Hills Resources Pine Bend Refinery in Rosemount, partnering with the Ordway for the 16th Annual Flint Hills International Children's Festival, June 4th and 5th in downtown St. Paul. More at ordway.org/festival.
On our Monday, all things considered, an individual committed with a developmental disability shouldn't be in a criminal setting where there are sexual predators. How people without mental illness are ending up in a state-run psychiatric hospital.
Oh,
That and all the day's news. Join me starting at 3.
Broadcast of Car Talk on Minnesota Public Radio is supported by St. Cloud Subaru and the 2016 Subaru Outback. Detailed information is available at
That should help.
stcloudsubaru.com. Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
Later today on This American Life. Okay, so you're in a subway car, and onto the car comes a guy wearing no pants. A couple stops later, somebody else gets on, also no pants. This keeps happening every few stops until the train has many, many people on it. No pants. Then somebody comes barreling through the car.
Alright guys, it's lunchtime. I'm gonna take a break. I'm hungry. I need food. I'm gonna die. Ooh, I still got coffee. But I'll be working on this again. It'll probably be awesome. I just wish it worked quite the way that I wanted.
Modern daily drivers to new brake shoes from old favorites. More at rockauto.com. And
Anyway, yeah, I'll be back.